2:45 p.m. on a Tuesday, an IVR system at mid-sized company silently failed. Not a complete outage, not an error message, it just stopped routing calls correctly. Callers were hitting the menu, pressing options, and getting dropped into a general queue that nobody was monitoring. By 6 p.m. that evening, the company losses were over £50,000 in revenue. They found out through the customer complaint, not from their own system. That's an extreme version, but the quieter version, the version where the IVR doesn't fail catastrophically, it just fails slowly. That one happens every single day with many companies. My name is Daria. I work at this intersection of enterprise call handling and AI. And one of the things I spend a lot of time on is understanding where the real cost in a call operation actually sits. IVR is one of those areas where the received wisdom and the actual numbers are very far apart. Most organizations believe that IVR is saving them money. In most cases, the evidence says something different. The original promise of IVR made complete sense. You have a high volume of inbound calls. A lot of those calls are simple and repetitive. Account balance, opening hours, basic information. If you can route those calls to a self-service menu instead of live agent, you reduce agent workload, lowering your cost per call, and free up your team for complex stuff. That was the logic. And in a world where the alternative was a live agent answering every call, it made complete sense. But that logic was built on a critical assumption that the callers would actually use the menu, that they would navigate it successfully, that the outcome of on the other side, the self-service resolution, would be good enough that they wouldn't need to call back. All three of those assumptions turned out to be wrong for a meaningful proportion of callers, and that's where the problem starts. Here's what the data says about caller behavior when they hit an IVR. 40% of callers hang up within the first 20 seconds. 90% have hung out within 60 seconds. Yes, 90% of callers who reach your IVR have given up within 1 minute. Now think about who those callers are. Some of them are low intent. They were browsing, the call was casual, they'll try again. But a significant proportion of them are high intent. They had a specific reason to call, they wanted to speak to someone, they hit a menu, couldn't find the right option fast enough, and they left. And if you spend money on paid search, social advertisement, or any channel that drives inbound call volume, those callers include people your marketing budget just paid to reach. Someone clicked your ad, dialed your number, hit your IVR, and was gone within 30 seconds. You paid for that click. The IVR turned into a bounce. This is the dynamic that doesn't appear anywhere in your IVR cost analysis. The IVR looks efficient on paper. It handled X amount of calls without agent involvement. It doesn't show that the calls got lost or what those calls were worth. The feedback from people who have been on the receiving end of this is pretty direct. If your IVR needs a map, it's already broken. Circular loops trying to find the right option, then dumped into a general queue. Being told your call is important to us every second while on hold. These are not edge cases. That was a large proportion of your caller's experience every day. Here's the part that surprises people when they first look at this clearly. IVR was designed to deflect calls. The idea is route the simple stuff to self-service, reduce live agent volume. Deflection is a success metric. But deflection doesn't mean resolution. And when a call gets deflected without being resolved, something happened. The caller tries again. They call back. They try a different time of the day. They try a different menu option. They call a general number instead of the direct line. They send an email that they generate a response call. They complain with generation escalation call. In healthcare, this shows up as an avoidant contact problem. 40% of inbound volume in calls that exist because something didn't get resolved properly at the first instant. In hospitality and property, it shows up as repeat calls and extended handling times. IVR deflects the call. The call doesn't go away. It comes back, usually angrier, usually more expensive to handle, and often via a channel that's harder to manage than the original inbound call would have been. So the IVR saved you costs of one handled call. It generated 2 or 3 more in its place. That is the hidden tax, not a line item on your P&L, not visible in your call central metrics, just a quiet multiplier sitting underneath your cost per call figures, making everything slightly more expensive than it needs to be. Let's put some numbers around this. A typical enterprise handle says 500 inbound calls per day. The IVR deflects 30%, so 150 calls get handled by self-service. 350 reaches a live agent. That looks like a win, and 150 calls saved. But what is the abandon rate of those 150 deflected calls? If 40% hang up in the frustration, there's 60 callers who didn't get a resolution. Some of them call back, some of them complain, some just leave your business forever. Now, how many of the 60 clients were high intent? How many were paid leads? How many were existing customers with a time-sensitive issue? You don't know. The IVR doesn't tell you. The deflection metric says it handled 150 calls. It doesn't tell you what it did to them. And then there is a downstream cost. Every repeat call from an unresolved first call, every complaint-driven escalation, every customer who left because the experience was frustrating enough to tip them towards a competitor. None of that shows up in the IVR cost analysis. The IVR looks efficient, the total cost of the call operation is higher than it should be, and the link between the two never gets made. This is why it's called a hidden tax. It's real, it's ongoing, and it doesn't appear on any report that asking the right question. The standard response when IVR performance becomes a problem is to optimize the prompts. Rewrite the menu option, reduce the number of levels, test different voice talent, A/B testing, the whole music. And these things do produce marginal improvements. The abandonment rate ticks down slightly, the queue shorten in a fraction. But the fundamental dynamics doesn't change. The IVR is still a menu, callers still have to navigate it, the ones who can't or won't still live. The deflected calls that don't resolve still come back. As one operation leader put it, most companies keep updating the prompts instead of upgrading the system. The prompts are not the problem. The architecture is the problem. A menu-driven system that routes to self-service is, by design, a system that a meaningful proportion of callers will not successfully use. Optimizing the menu makes a bad experience slightly less bad. It doesn't change what the experience fundamentally is. The alternative to IVR deflection is actual resolution, handling the call in a way that means the caller doesn't need to contact you again. What that looks like in practice varies by organization, but the starting point is the same: understanding which calls your IVR is currently handling, which of those is actually resolving, and which is losing or generating downstream cost for. That analysis usually produces a different picture than the IVR dashboard, and it changes the conversation about what the phone system is actually for. Here's what I want you to take from this. First, IVR deflection is not the same as IVR resolution. When a call gets deflected without being resolved, it comes back, usually more expensive and harder to handle than the original call would have been. Second, the abandonment rate is the number your IVR dashboard isn't showing you prominently enough. 40% in 20 seconds, 90% in 60 seconds. Those are your callers, including your paid leads, deciding the experience isn't worth continuing. Third, optimizing the prompts doesn't fix the architecture. The fundamental issue with menu-driven calls deflection isn't the wording, it's the model. One question before you go. What does your current IVR abandonment rate look like? And do you know what percentage of those abandoned calls come back? Drop it in the comments. If this video was helpful, please subscribe to my channel. A new video will come next week. Thank you so much and goodbye.